Welcome, everybody, to the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide. We are back here for our October edition of the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide. We're here with Tyler, Coleman, Brian, Christiana, and Parker Rose. I got to remember to be a little bit better on our titles here. So Parker is now the president of the Nightly News Media Club. Tyler, how has graduation treated you thus far?
It's been great. You know, the first 2 weeks off, it didn't really set in right away because I think that was just pretty much like a normal break for us. But really starting last week when I saw everybody posting on Facebook and different social media about being back on campus, I think that's when it really set in. Like, wow, I'm actually a graduate. But it's been fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the future holds.
Well, I sent you a couple of jobs on social media. I'll probably do that every once in a while, but I'm sure that you're fully capable of finding something. But I know that you want to get into sports. Tough time to enter this market, but keep up with it, and I'm sure you'll find something before too long. Of course, Brian and Parker, I appreciate you being here. Brian is I'm sure, gone through a lot in his first week back, dealing with some issues with residents, but I'm sure you're hanging in there. And Parker's working on his internship. So how's that been going so far, Parker?
I love my internship. Love the job. Very, very relaxing. Great environment. Fun to work in.
That's awesome. I'm very glad to hear that. Well, we are not here to talk about all of these wonderful things. We are here to talk about fantasy football, and boy, has a lot happened since the last episode back in September. Here's what's funny, guys. One of the biggest things that we talked about last time was how few injuries there were. Well, wouldn't you know it, the next week, Saquon Barkley out for the season. Obviously now, we're dealing with Dak Prescott, but then Christian McCaffrey out for indefinite. And in fact, I've even looked at Christian McCaffrey, and we'll talk about this shortly, I'm sure. There's still not really any indication on when he is going to return either. So lots of major running back injuries. Julio Jones, Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams haven't played since our last podcast. Well, Julio Jones did, but he had a 0 a couple weeks ago. Anyway, so we're really going to try to sift through all of this. Interestingly enough, in our last podcast, we also talked about how COVID really hadn't messed with any games thus far. Obviously, that is not the case either, and that's kind of where I want to start, gentlemen. What are some tips that you can give our listeners for how to deal with this interesting season, in that games canceled, moved, postponed? We have to be really good in terms of fantasy managers to be able to navigate this tide, and it seems like it's going to be something that happens all season. So I'm going to go around the table. If you can just give me one thing maybe that you've been doing so far, or something that you might be able to share with our audience that might help them navigate this season with all these postponements and rescheduled games. Tyler?
Well, the biggest thing that I can think of is just to try to have a backup player in mind in case something goes down. You know, keep your eyes on people that are still out in the free agency pool. You know, I had this happen to me last week where I had Patrick Mahomes, and they said that last week when they were supposed to play the Patriots, that game got pushed back. Well, I also had Ben Roethlisberger on my roster. The Steelers-Titans game was canceled, so I had to pick up another quarterback. Well, unfortunately, I ended up having to drop Roethlisberger. I picked up Teddy Bridgewater, then only for them to say, okay, well, now the Chiefs and the Patriots are going to play. So, of course, I put Mahomes back in the starting lineup, and unfortunately, I lost Roethlisberger as I saw you pick them up. But, you just got to keep an eye out for, people that you can pick up in case something arises like that.
Brian, any insight that how you've navigated it so far, and tips for our listeners?
Very similar. I would, just a prime example, this week we have Buffalo playing tonight against Tennessee. A guy that, and this is not in our league, someone that's been on the waiver wire a lot is Justin Herbert. So I picked him up just in case if they were going to announce, hey, Tuesday's game is canceled. So I just I could plug in the Monday night game.
I think that you really have a good thought process here, and part of this is to have as much flexibility as possible. So a couple things. First of all, when you see a Thursday night game that's going off, and now obviously this coming up week we do not have a Thursday night game, which is going to be odd, but we have a Tuesday night game. Interesting there. But my point is, I had a situation where I had Jonnu Smith in my tight end in our league, and Cameron Brate, and earlier in the week Wednesday and Thursday, it wasn't clear whether the Titans were going to play. So I actually rolled with Brate. Now, again, we are recording this Tuesday afternoon, so it remains to be seen if Smith has a decent game or not. But Brate ended up getting me 9 points. I mean, that's not great, but that was a strategy that I used. If you have an opportunity to play somebody earlier in the week, the game's definitely going to go, and you're debating between that person and someone else, I would tend to use the person that's playing earlier just to make sure you get some points. To your point, taking a look at games on Monday night and maybe filling out, maybe putting a waiver claim on somebody, maybe you have your last position on your bench, maybe you pick up someone that's on a Monday night. And I'll give you one more before we get to Parker. Anyone who is on a game that might, or that there's any indication that it could be postponed or canceled, put those people in your flex. Because, for example, if I would have put Devin Singletary in my running back spot, that game ends up getting canceled, then there's a lot less people I might be able to pick up in that particular case. So if you can swap out your flex to be somebody who's maybe in that position, that might be another one. Parker, how have you been handling this?
One, experimenting with players. We're at the point where we have so many injuries that you got to play risk and just experiment. But what I've been really doing is reading all the articles that the fantasy people been posting, because Raheem Mostert, for example, he's on my team. I did not know if he was going to start, so I took the risk and put someone else in over him. And good thing I ended up starting Connor over him, because Connor put up more points than he did. And the same thing with Julio Jones. Julio Jones, at this point, we don't know what he's going to do. I have him on my team, and I'm actually thinking about either using him as trade bait or don't know what I want to do with him.
Well, I wouldn't drop him at this point. But yeah, so I think that this has become a very interesting season for fantasy managers. The one thing that I would not do, one of my leagues has had some sort of infighting about moving any prize money to the following season because of this. And that's one thing I would really, really try to resist at any cost, is to try and move those things forward. When we got into this, we knew what was going on as a season. I think it's going to make a better fantasy manager. I think it's going to be more important to have deeper teams right now. So, just keep that in mind. I know this is difficult. I know that in some cases it's going to benefit you, and in some cases it's going to hurt you. So we just got to try to take it one step at a time and 1 week at a time, and really keeping in mind, that things are going to be fluid. It's not going to be our traditional fantasy season. So things have changed immensely. As far as our top 25, I want to take a look at our top 5 players. I think that we might have some very different ideas about our top 5. Parker, I'm going to start with you. Who are your top 5 players?
I have DeAndre Hopkins, Dalvin Cook. I still have Devontae Adams, Zeke, and Derrick Henry.
And I think one of the things that we are, when we're giving our current rosters, it would be, hey, we're in a draft today for the rest of the season. So I think it's fair that you have Devontae Adams. I mean, yes, he's been hurt, and so season long, yes, he's kind of burned you, but he should be back this week. They've had their bye now. He's going to be ready to go. He's not going to miss any more weeks. I think between him and Hopkins, I think that they are wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 at this point. I also definitely like Cook. It remains to be seen about his injury. Talking about a strained abductor, I would say to make sure that you have Madison if you have Cook, or grab Madison, and then after you get a week out of him, trade him to who has Cook, because that's really where the handcuff comes in handy. So interesting. And, of course, Zeke rounds out your top 5. Very interesting. Brian?
I went with Mahomes. Number 2, I went with Josh Allen from Buffalo. 3rd, Kamara from the Saints. 4th, Aaron Jones from Green Bay. And then 5th, Lamar Jackson.
You're very quarterback heavy there at the top. What's your thought process there?
I mean, those are points right there. And I mean, these 3 guys are guaranteed to at least get you over 25 a week.
I obviously Mahomes to me is he's in my, I have him at 11. He's definitely my top quarterback. Does it concern you at all his past couple of weeks?
I mean, the 1 week was 40 and then last week was 29. So I mean that's pretty solid. I mean we're just not used to seeing these type of Patrick Mahomes numbers where he got 20 points the 1 week. We just weren't used to seeing that. We're always used to him dropping 35 a week.
I think it, if nothing else, shows the chink in the armor, if you will, their loss against Las Vegas. I'm curious if maybe we start seeing some more defensive matchups like that. I did want to stop about with Kamara for a second. And Parker, I'm really surprised that he didn't crack your top 5, especially in a PPR league. He is by far the top player. He is averaging 29 points a week. He is on pace to destroy 1,000 yards receiving, much like Christian McCaffrey did last year. And he's also getting a considerable amount of carries. While this year he has had 12, 13, 6, 19, and 11 carries and hasn't really put up any eye-popping rushing numbers, a 79 and an 83 against Detroit. Okay, Green Bay, 13 catches for 139 yards, 2 touchdowns. Even this week against the Chargers on Monday night, 8 for 74. Didn't get in the end zone for the first time this year. I have Kamara at number 1, especially with Barkley out, McCaffrey, who knows. I think Kamara has got to be the top player right now, in my personal opinion. So, Tyler, your thoughts on the top 5?
Well, I'm a little bit like Brian. I'm quarterback heavy as well. I have Mahomes at number 1. I still have Jackson at number 2. I have Tyreek Hill at number 3. DeAndre Hopkins at number 4. And I got Russell Wilson at number 5.
Interestingly enough, I moved Wilson up considerably. I still have him at my quarterback 4, which we'll talk about shortly. I also have Hopkins. I've been high on Hopkins all year. I have him now at number 3 and as my number 1 receiver, though I think Tyreek Hill is not a bad play there, certainly moving forward, especially with the injury to Sammy Watkins. Watkins will be out there for a while, so I guess their number 2 would be Mecole Hardman.
Yeah, he's good.
Obviously Kelsey in there. Hilaire has gotten some targets. I honestly think that the issue with the Chiefs is they've got so many playmakers that not every single one of them each week can put up serious numbers. Tyreek has been pretty solid in terms of fantasy-wise, but he hasn't had any of those huge weeks thus far.
Travis is still putting up consistent. He averages about 18 a week.
I will say that, so Hill has scored in double digits every week, has had a touchdown every week, whether on the ground or through the air, hasn't, though, broken 100 yards receiving, and hasn't had more than 5 catches in a single week. So, again, I think that speaks to the way that they're kind of distributing the ball in Kansas City. As a Kansas City fan, what were your thoughts, Tyler, about last week against Las Vegas?
Well, I think, look, I don't want to take anything away from the Raiders because I think they're an improved team. But the Chiefs really, they just really played a bad game. There were too many stupid penalties. They took a lot of points off the board. There were a few calls made by the referees, which I don't think really affected the outcome, but I think, looking back at it, there was one where Tyreek Hill could have had another touchdown where I think it was a pass interference call. They didn't call anything. So it really was their fault in a way that they lost, which I'm okay with because it's not like I was expecting them to go 16-0.
Yes, you were.
I mean, in the back of my mind, I was really hoping so. But no, I figured they would win 12 or 13 games. But I think the loss really stinks more just because it was to the Raiders.
Well, and I think the Raiders are probably one of the more undervalued teams. I don't. Maybe it's just because of an East Coast West Coast bias. The games we watch every week are typically your AFC, NFC East games, or even Central. We don't really get to see a whole lot of Raiders, but they've fought. I know that they have a couple losses, but they've fought. They've been in every single game, and obviously, to beat the Chiefs, that's their statement win on the season so far.
So you could consider them one of your dark horses of the year, one of the dark horses to maybe slip into a wild card spot. Granted, we do play a full season still.
I think that's very fair to think that the Las Vegas. It's still so tough for me to say that. Las Vegas Raiders. I think they've got a real good shot to make the playoffs at this point.
Yeah, Vegas is a very solid team. Actually, Derek Carr is someone who I would really look into, just fantasy and regular season-wise.
Well, interestingly, on Derek Carr, let's take a look at some of his numbers. Not the best showing week 1, 13 points, but after that, 21, 15, 20, and 23. Coming into bye weeks, certainly you could do worse than having him as a backup. 3 touchdowns. has fumbled 4 times this year, which I'm seems to be a lot for me.
Well, especially with the best offensive line in the NFL, probably. So, I mean, that's kind of surprising.
I will also say, though, that Derek Carr has some good threats, though, in the wide receiver and the backfield.
Yeah,
So
Ruggs has played very well. Jacobs has overperformed.
even Aguilar is actually doing quite decent for them.
I'm actually really surprised that Philly let him go. I know that he was sort of a bust as a first-round pick, but he's really stepped up. And even his last season in Philly, but they literally had no one. I mean, they're pulling guys off the street, and he at least would have had some experience there. Aguilar's looking good. And you know who their tight end is?
Darren Waller.
And
Jason Witten.
So they've got a nice duo of tight ends there. So, all right, Parker, how about 6 to 10?
I have Mahomes at 6, Tyreek Hill at 7, Kelsey at 8, Andrews at 9, and Alvin Kamara at 10.
Why are you so down on Kamara? I mean, most of us have him in our top 5. Why? He's literally getting most of the carries and a significant amount of touches out of the backfield receiving.
Let's see what happens when Michael Thomas comes back.
Well, is Michael Thomas going to come back?
That's why Kamara's 10, because we don't know if Thomas comes back.
I'm curious to hear more. Have any of you really heard about number one? The reason that he didn't play on Monday Night Football was not injury related.
It's because he got into a fight with his teammate.
So I read a couple of different stories about who he got into fights with and what actually ended up happening. Did anyone hear anything more about that?
Is he going to be the next Earl Thomas?
You know, I think that the NFL is one of those sports, unless you're like, Kareem Hunt or, a seriously egregious situation, even on camera, Ray Rice, those types of people, that if you do something like that, and if you are a superstar, there's kind of different levels of expectations there. So you're thinking that when Thomas comes back, that Kamara's role is really going to fall back somewhat?
I think so, because we noticed that Drew Brees is not doing too good in the passing game right now. He's looking terrible.
Is Breeze done?
This is Peyton. I don't know if anyone remembers, but this is the same exact thing with Peyton Manning his final season, where he had a pretty rough regular season. But what happened? They still won the Super Bowl at the end. I'm not saying that there's a conspiracy theory on that, but it's just history repeating itself.
So can we say conspiracy that Andy Dalton's going to take you guys to the Super Bowl?
So, well, now that we're mentioning, I mean, a little out of order here, is Andy Dalton, considering the fact how high octane the Cowboys offense is and the fact that their defense literally can't stop anyone, although that they did somewhat show up against the Giants, is Andy Dalton a viable fantasy candidate at this point?
I'm going to go no based on the offensive line. I would say the only player that I would really trust right now, I'm not going to say the only player, but I would take Zeke and Schultz. Amari Cooper.
Over Lamb.
Cooper really didn't do anything
Cooper
last
had
week.
2 receptions, 23 yards last week. Going into last week, he was the number 2 wide receiver, but, I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's going to be one or the other. Gallup had a pretty good showing with Andy Dalton, so, I mean, Gallup's stock will probably go up, but the offensive line is so banged up. I have some thoughts, like some really negative thoughts about Dallas's fantasy value.
CeeDee Lamb, though, 5 catches, 6, 5, 5, 8, very consistent, double-digit fantasy points every game, 10, 17, 11, 25, and 20. Only gotten in the end zone twice, but definitely, 6+ targets in every game and 11 on Sunday against the Giants. Early leader for Rookie of the Year?
Probably. I would say there's some good candidates. I mean, Ruggs had a pretty good week as well, but I think CeeDee Lamb right now probably is the Herbert's in there too.
And you got Justin Jefferson. You got so many good candidates. A lot of the rookies are showing up this year. You would think that they would struggle with the COVID pandemic, but they are all showing up. Granted, Joe Burrows is getting knocked around a lot, but
that's not all his fault.
It's not. That offensive line is terrible.
While we're on the subject of the Cowboys, one of the people who I'm actually really surprised has had a poor season has been Michael Gallup. Gallup did have a 25-point game at Seattle, 6 for 138 and a touchdown. Otherwise, no more than 11 points. Brian, what are your thoughts on Gallup moving forward?
Gallup's not a bad person to have. I mean, it seems, though, like Cooper and Lamb are the attractions for fantasy lineups and just target-wise. Again, the impact of Dak not being there is going to be really huge. But also, again, I'm going to bring up the offensive line just isn't there. I mean, you're starting 2 rookies now, 2 of them with not much experience, and now Biage is coming in, another rookie. So we'll see. But Gallup, I mean, I like the routes that Gallup runs. He'll do a lot of midfield he'll be the deep guy. He's not bad, but he's going to be a back and forth type of guy. I think Lamb and Gallup are going to be your more reliable players.
Interesting. All right, Brian, 6 through 10.
You're actually going to be surprised. Well, I don't think you'll be surprised. I have DeAndre Hopkins. I put Stephon Diggs in there. Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, and then Zeke.
Zeke all the way down to 10 because of the line.
Zeke, the Atlanta game really had me worry about Zeke and the offensive team in general. A lot of fumbles this year so far. Zeke has had a couple fumbles. It's just like Zeke has been saying he's going to go off this year, and this is just like another ordinary year for Zeke. So
5 touchdowns in 5 games, Brian?
that's great, and I mean, but he needs to be that guy that scores for them.
And outside of sort of an anomaly at the Giants, at least 3 catches in 3 games was 6+. You're talking 27, 22, 17, 20, and 23. That's what I want in a first-round pick.
Hey, number 10 is still a first-round pick.
No, you're exactly right. I agree. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I mean, he was going into the season ranked Zeke was 3 or 4.
At this point, you're probably in pretty good shape.
Yeah, if you have Zeke, he's not a bad option. But I mean, the people that are in front of him on the list, I think, are pretty good options as well.
Why so high on Diggs?
I think it's also the fact that we did not expect Stephon Diggs to be doing what he's doing right now.
I don't think we expected Josh Allen to be doing what he's
Exactly. So
doing either.
Buffalo's offense is playing pretty good, and same with Devin Singletary as well. So that whole offense is playing pretty good. And I was, again, one of those people that was like, Stephon Diggs, not someone I would really buy into, but he's proven us all wrong. And he's ranked in the top, if I'm correct, top 5 out of wide receivers right now.
What's interesting here is 86, 153, 49, and 115, 2 touchdowns on the year. Lowest fantasy output was 14.9.
Which still is not bad for a wide receiver.
Definitely, I don't know that I would put him that high. What I would say, though, is you're in this area of Michael Thomas, Godwin, Julio Jones. Diggs has been certainly better thus far, but reasonably could be better going forward with the way that Josh Allen stepped up for sure. Tyler, who do you have 6 through 10?
Number 6, I have Kyler Murray. Number 7, I have Travis Kelce. Number 8, I have Chris Carson. Number 9, I have Josh Allen. And 10, I have Zeke Elliott.
Yeah, Chris Carson's one that I really wanted to talk about. I actually have him at number 9. He was someone who has really... every year in fantasy, he goes undervalued. I'm not going to say he goes undrafted because that's definitely not the case. But he goes undervalued. He always is catching passes out of the backfield. The lowest he had, 10 against Dallas in week 3. The next lowest, 19.8 at New England. He's getting you anywhere from 3 to 6 catches a week.
To be fair, too, he was taken out earlier in that Dallas game, or I think he would have had more points.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that he, and they're in some trouble, too. I think now that I remember, taken out is the operative word there with Chris Carson against Dallas. Something underhanded there, Brian, that was going on in the Dallas defense.
I do agree with that, Miller. I was not very happy at that
Did
point.
anything ever come of that? Did he ever get sanctioned by the league, or even fined?
Nothing.
I'm really surprised by that.
And then
because,
Chris Carson came back next week and went off.
Well, I was actually really surprised that he came back. And how about this? He only had 8 carries against Minnesota, 8 for 52. I know they were trailing for a lot of that game.
Yeah.
Well, basically all of that game they were trailing. But did have 6 catches out of the backfield, which in a PPR league is a big help. I like Chris Carson. I'm just going to rattle off my top 10 quick. I missed my top 5. Kamara. One name I haven't heard so far, Derrick Henry, I have him at 2. Hopkins, Hilaire, haven't heard that much of that name either. Zeke, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin, because I believe he's going to be back this week. Carson, and another name that's strangely been absent, Miles Sanders. I like Sanders for a variety of reasons. He's really, yes, Boston Scott has gotten some run, but not only do they not have anyone else in the backfield, they don't have anyone else to throw to. I think Sanders is in line for a huge workload moving forward. At least 11 carries in every game, at least 3 games of 80-plus yards, 3 touchdowns. getting targeted. Only one poor game against San Francisco, but 15 points in every other outing. So I like Miles Sanders here. Thoughts on Miles Sanders, guys?
Torch the Steelers defense.
Yeah, I would say that. Steelers D started off really hot. I was surprised that the game was that close. It didn't seem that close, but they were in it until the missed 57-yard field goal.
Well, also, I'm going to take a page of what Tyler said earlier. I think the refs also were making really bad calls that game. Too many bad pass interference calls on both sides. I'm not going to be one-sided. There was bad calls on both sides of the field, but I don't know what's wrong with the Steelers secondary. Joe Hayden, who was in the beginning of the season a top 3 CB, and then Minkah Fitzpatrick, he's like not even available.
Well, my thoughts here are I'm hoping that they look great, though. 4-0. They did have that bye early in the season. Roethlisberger not happy about that. But, that's just another situation of where we got to just kind of roll along with it. And this is going to happen a lot. Every day when I get on Twitter, I'm looking for Adam Schefter because I'm afraid of what I'm going to read from Adam Schefter. All right, we're not necessarily going to have a chance to go through the rest of our top 25. We did all get our top 10 in. I would like everyone to just take a look at 2 people that you think you have ranked higher than some of our other rankers and talk about why you're so high on those people. I'm going to go around each time for one, and then I'll go around a second time. Parker.
I'm going with Devontae Parker. He is showing up for Miami. He had a good last couple weeks. Despite the injury, he's still putting up points with his injury. So I'm going to give him some credit on my top 25.
I got to say, Fitzmagic continues to be magical. Even though I think they're actually one of the more surprising teams in the NFL. They just laid the smackdown on San Francisco this last week. When you guys saw that score, maybe if any of you were watching it, but when you saw that score, didn't you it was like 30-7 at halftime?
Yeah, that was pretty wild.
Parker, I do like it. I don't know if he just shares your namesake. That's why you're so high on him. But double-digit fantasy points the last 4 weeks. He's still available, and he's rostered in 92% of leagues. So if he's still out there, I think he's a good person to pick up.
He's a good flex.
But, absolutely. I think he's a good wide receiver, too, honestly.
I have him as 2 because injuries.
Brian, someone you're high on that maybe we might not be, and why?
Gurley. I have Todd Gurley, just knowing the fact that offense has been very mediocre. Gurley's numbers are pretty solid so far this season also. So, Gurley was remember when we were doing our live episode, that was the guy I was like, out of the 3 running backs we compared, he was the one I was second on. So, but he's not having a bad season.
No less than 14 carries in every game. Did have a couple kind of down games, especially 21 for 61 against Dallas and no catches. Something that I heard a little bit about, do you feel that because of Gurley's skill in catching balls out of the backfield, do you think the coaching change might allow Gurley to get more involved in the passing game?
Could be. I mean, Julio Jones is still there. There's a lot of question marks with that going on. And the tight end position, they really downgraded on Hayden Hurst instead of Austin Hooper.
I don't know. Is it a downgrade? I mean, Matt Ryan had Hurst wide open. I mean, there wasn't anyone within 5 yards of him in the end zone and overthrow him.
Well, I'm going to speak on Matt Ryan. I think he's been playing terrible because fantasy-wise, I have him in our league. The last 3 weeks, he hasn't done anything. Like this week alone, he had me 6 points. And as a starting quarterback, that just can't happen.
I don't even have Matt Ryan in my top 10, and I can't even imagine rostering him at this point. I mean, I guess if Jones is back and Ridley and maybe Gurley gets going and Hayden Hurst, I mean, he's got weapons, but who knows? Maybe does Matt Ryan get traded to a Dallas team or something like
that? That's wow. Thanks.
I mean, they're not. Who's going to want a 35-year-old quarterback?
Not me. I'll take Dak.
I would imagine that a fair amount of teams who feel that they have a shot this year, maybe they're just not ready at quarterback, that they would pull the trigger. And I'm telling you right now, I think Dallas is one of them. Because, and there's a couple reasons. Number one, Dak's a free agent. Yes, they can franchise him again. And I'm not saying they want to move away from Dak, but at the same time, a very serious injury. I don't know if they have to give up all that much to get Matt Ryan. Maybe the Falcons just want to get out from under that contract. And is Andy Dalton really the answer in Dallas?
I don't know. Your question is as good as mine. I really don't know.
So, all right, Tyler, somebody in your top 25 that you're high on.
I have DK Metcalf.
Yep, I had that too.
Somebody that, I think can easily get overlooked, but the Seahawks are playing fantastic right now. We talked about Chris Carson. Metcalf seems to be Wilson's number one target right now. He's catching a lot of touchdowns, and he's having big games.
5 touchdowns in 5 games, a minimum of 6 targets, and 3 games of 8+ targets. He's well over 500 yards. Again, 5 touchdowns, very, very consistent. DK, I think, has overtaken Tyler Lockett as the number one target there.
Yeah.
My only issue with both of them, and I actually have Lockett at 8 and Metcalf at 9 in my wide receiver rankings. My only concern with Lockett is he's kind of boom or bust at this point. Against Miami in Week 4, 2 for 39, didn't even have a catch until the fourth quarter, and then he basically was invisible against Minnesota. So I'm cautiously optimistic about Lockett's future, but not really sure. All right, I'm going to do one. Let's see. I think Chris Godwin. Again, we're not totally sure when he's going to be back, but if we're talking rest of the season, the Brady experiment has gone okay, short of him not knowing what down it is. I think Gronk is droppable at this point. He doesn't even look in shape. He caught a pass on Thursday night and ran out of bounds and was gassed from running 10 yards downfield. So I'm interested how that goes. I think Godwin's going to be a superstar when he comes back. I just hope he can stay healthy. Just one more quick one. Parker.
Kareem Hunt.
Kareem Hunt I like. I don't think he's going to get the full complement. Dearness Johnson, and he's done a lot. And Nick Chubb, who knows when he'll be back. But I do like Kareem Hunt. I have him at 16. Where do you have him, Parker?
I had him at 15.
Good. Yeah, I like Kareem Hunt.
I put Robbie Anderson in mine from
I
Carolina.
think he's underrated. I actually have him at 12 on my wide receivers. I think the only issue with Anderson is he's not gotten into the end zone. I believe he only has 1 touchdown so far in the year, but he's definitely solid in fantasy. His target, 1 game with 5, but every other game with 8. Only 1 touchdown on the season, but I think that'll change. 13 targets, and the week before 11 targets. So definitely somebody who not necessarily is going to be available, but definitely somebody you probably got later. Tyler.
Yes, I'm going to stick with Brian there in Carolina. I got Mike Davis, who, I picked him up in one of my other leagues once McCaffrey went down, and he's playing really well. I mean, he's putting up solid points. He's pretty consistent. So, picking him up, I'm pretty happy about that.
I like Mike Davis. And again, I think what's more troubling here is that there's no insight on Christian McCaffrey. He's on IR. There hasn't been any news on him lately. There's no insight on when he's going to be back. Frankly, he was scoring, and he had well over 20 fantasy points his first 2 weeks, but boy, you're not sure when he's coming back. And here's the thing. Even when he does come back, isn't Davis still going to have some run? Wouldn't you think?
I'm sure he will, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, one final person for me. Allen Robinson I have coming in at 19. Really, for whatever reason, really underrated. I don't know why. He is just, no matter who his quarterback is, he is just something special. Listen to this. The last 3 games, target 16, 10, and 13, and then 2 9s. I mean, he's probably one of the tops in the league in targets. Now, how is the Nick Foles, Mitch Trubisky situation going to play out? Hard to say. Foles did beat the Golden Boy on Thursday night, so we're interested to see how that goes.
Well, don't forget it's also a contract year for him, so I think he could be trying to ball out, but at the same time that could maybe be messing with his head.
Yep, I would agree.
This is co-host Tyler Coleman. Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide.
Well, we're going to move right along. So to ask everybody to do sleepers, so we kind of talked about that, so I just want you to pick one. So outside of your top 25, Who are some people that you feel very strongly about? Who are some people that maybe you want to make sure you have in your starting lineup that might be on your bench? So who are some of the sleepers? Give me 2 sleepers, Parker.
I would put Odell up there because he's starting to produce finally. I guess he found his rhythm in Cleveland. And the other one, maybe Mike Evans because he's starting to step up with Godwin being out.
I wonder what Evans' stat line looks like when Godwin does come back. I know O.J. Howard being out of the lineup could help Evans. I think one of the things that troubles me, though, with Evans is, yes, he is scoring touchdowns. So if you're a fantasy manager, you're good with that. But to be honest, let's look at some of his receiving totals this year. 104, 122, and 41. Now, again, 6 touchdowns in 5 games. Pretty impressive.
So they look for him, when they get in the red zone.
Yeah.
So, but again, I wonder how much Chris Godwin plays into that. So, Brian, 2 sleepers.
I put Devontae Freeman from the Giants and Justin Jackson from the Chargers.
I like Freeman. I was very early on picking him up. I actually picked him up in a league before he was even signed because I knew pretty much when Barkley went out, that's probably where he was going to go. He finally, for the first time, actually did something fantasy-wise this week, did get in the end zone. They are involving him in the passing game. But gosh, they're just so bad.
They are bad.
I mean,
it's lack of talent.
It's tough to play anyone. Ingram has been a huge disappointment. Barkley, obviously out. Freeman might have some, but I do like him, and I do think going forward he's going to be a solid running back. Tyler, 2 sleepers.
Well, I put C.D. Lamb down. I mean, I know we kind of already talked about that, but him being a rookie coming into this year, we didn't know what he was going to do. But now, with all the injuries that they've had, I think he's going to continue to be a top target. And I also took James Conner from the Steelers. He had a bit of an up-and-down season last year, but I think if the Steelers are going to have a good season, he's going to have to be a big part of it.
I'm really surprised that he didn't actually put in that he hasn't had better weeks. Here's one that I really wanted to talk about, and I had him at quarterback 10, and it's Teddy Bridgewater. Maybe that's not a sleeper.
But the Panthers are playing better than I think most of us thought.
I don't want to say I'm shocked. They have a decent team. I think their defense is playing better than we would have believed. But Teddy Bridgewater, I'm going to make the case for him to be a starting quarterback at this point. The lowest passing numbers that he's had, 235 at the Chargers. He's running the ball. He's rushed for about 100 yards so far in the season. He did have the one game against Tampa where he threw the picks, but did have 367 that game. I think once McCaffrey comes back, I would have a hard time benching him. I do have Brady and Cam Newton ahead of him in the rankings, but Belichick's not even sure if Newton's going to start this week. Brady, fantasy-wise, hasn't been anything crazy spectacular. I have Deshaun Watson, who's been up and down, and then you're getting into the Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to make the case that, yes, now I have him at 10, but I think before our next podcast, Bridgewater could easily move up to 7. And I think that if you have Bridgewater or you have a shot to get Bridgewater, I think now's the time.
Granted, hopefully nothing happens to him.
He's had a wonderful shot right thus far to put up some points, and he seems very mobile. I think he is a sleeper in my mind. Now let's go to some disappointments. I'm going to lead off here. I think the biggest disappointments thus far have been the marquee injuries. Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, Godwin, Saquon Barkley, and Christian McCaffrey are arguably 5 of the top 10 picks in the fantasy draft. Now, all of those, except for Barkley, seem like they're going to be back. So who knows how they're going to be? It remains to be seen about Michael Thomas. Again, I don't want to say suspended, but benched for fighting his teammate. Julio Jones was a game-time decision this week. Godwin should be back soon, and McCaffrey, no news. I think that's really been the biggest disappointment thus far, is injuries. And obviously, that's something we see in fantasy sports, not even just football. But and we have to navigate those. I think, though, this illustrates the need for handcuffs. Now, again, we talked a lot about receivers there. It's not always easy to handcuff a receiver. That being said, Traquan Smith has stepped in for Thomas. Ridley has stepped up for Julio Jones. Evans has put up some points. Scotty Miller has, yes, he had the 0 last week, but I think he's going to have a decent game going forward. And, of course, Mike Davis. So, again, I think that this all goes to show you that your first-round picks, I think that a strategy that I'm going to use moving forward is I'm going to get handcuffs at receiver and running back. I know handcuffs are typically only reserved for running backs. But I think, if next year, if I take Michael Thomas, I'm going to take their third string wide receiver late in the draft and have him on a bench spot because Traquan Smith stepped up. So, Parker, who's one of your biggest disappointments so far on the season?
I'm just going to say with the league, with the virus in general, the league doesn't know what they want to do. Like they're saying, like when they're like a team gets COVID, they don't know, we don't know if they're going to practice. They might play. The problem with this, us fantasy players, they wait till the last minute to make the decision. So, like, say, for an example, if the Chiefs didn't play and I have Edwards-Helaire on my starting roster and all of a sudden they're not going to play, I'm taking a goose egg for that week because of last-minute decisions.
Something that I've heard some ESPN fantasy analysts talking about is maybe designating a backup player and that they're now allowing you to retroactively change people's rosters after the fact. So let's just say, a Monday night game gets canceled for some reason, and it's a question mark or a Tuesday night game. You can actually designate, okay, I want person X to play Josh Allen, but if that game gets canceled, I'm going to take Teddy Bridgewater. That's an option. I think that's a lot of work for commissioners to do. But honestly, it's just, okay, if there's a game in question, you got to roll the dice. And maybe they play, maybe they don't.
But if we're going to go in the game itself, I'm going to have to say Deshaun Watson's disappointing. Like, I don't know if I'm not going to complete...
The whole team's
disappointing. I'm not going to blame him for all of it, but fantasy-wise, he's always projected to be a top 5 quarterback to put up fantasy points. He's getting rushed. He's getting thrown around, getting sacked. David Johnson's not doing anything. He did step up, and your man Brandon Cooks actually stepped up this week and helped him out. But
after a game of 0,
it just keeps getting me. Like, I had Deshaun Watson a couple leagues last year and the year before. And it's just frustrating seeing him be projected to be so good and just doesn't deliver.
He's at least consistent. Like, he's not losing you weeks. Yes, he's not putting up the big points. My biggest concern, if you've watched him play this season, I think I brought this up on the last podcast. He's constantly scrambling outside the pocket on bootlegs, but he doesn't throw on the run. He's always looking to run the ball instead of trying to scramble outside the pocket and locate somebody. That said, he's thrown a touchdown pass in every game. He does have 5 picks, which is not good. He is running the ball somewhat, but 20, 14, 17, 20, and 25, that's not really going to win you leagues. And if you took him, where he was going early in the season, he's right now at quarterback 9. I would rather, moving forward, have someone like Teddy Bridgewater. So I would agree. Major disappointment with Deshaun Watson. Tyler.
Well, to your point, the injuries, I wanted to bring up Austin Eckler was another one. I have him in our league, and he's out 4 to 6 weeks, so he was my top running back, so that was unfortunate. But player-wise, I have Zach Ertz. I don't understand what happened to him. Dallas Goedert is on the IR. The Eagles' offensive players have had so many injuries. I don't understand why they're not looking for him more. He's always talked about as a top 5 tight end, and this season he has just been a complete bust.
A bust is, as I'd say, being polite.
He has one touchdown this season.
He did have the 7 for 70 against Cincinnati in the 5-quarter game. I wonder, 2 things I wonder here. First, did having Goddard take some pressure off of Ertz in terms of double teams in some of the formations they were running? And secondly, sort of backing up that point, who else do they even have that is being covered? I mean, they have to be double and probably even triple teaming Ertz. And one further thing, how many, and I would love to find out some more information, is Ertz blocking more because of the issues that the Eagles are having on the offensive line?
That could be a possibility because Miles Sanders, like you said, is having big gains. But to Tyler's point, though, when they do throw to Zach Ertz, he's dropping the ball.
He has dropped a couple of major passes.
He's overthrown, or he's not making the effort going for the ball. I don't know.
Position rank of 15 among tight ends with only 8.5 points. I guess you kind of just have to ride with him and hope that the Eagles right the ship. But gosh, that's a very good point. I would say that he's probably one of the top 3 or 4 most disappointing people in fantasy.
Because pre-draft, he is a top 3 tight end pre-draft.
Absolutely.
Now, seeing him drop 15, you're a fantasy owner, you're probably frustrated.
I've got him at 3, Kelsey, Kittle, and Ertz. And again, that's moving forward. I would say that, Andrews, Waller could certainly be above him. And with Hunter Henry's performance on Monday night, maybe he is moving forward above Ertz. But
I'm looking for Jimmy Graham, too, in Chicago.
I put him in my top 10, actually, of tight ends.
Yep.
I got to give him the respect.
I'm going to just end with one final disappointment, and that's got to be the Ravens' backfield. Mark Ingram, J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins, he was like a trendy sleeper in the draft going in the top 5-6 rounds. He hasn't had more than 7 touches in a week. Mark Ingram has had no more than 11 touches in a week. Are either of these two even useful in a flex on a bye week at this point?
And that's what's very interesting you make, Professor, because if you look at the last 2 weeks, Marquise Brown was getting a lot of receptions, and same with Mark Andrews. I think 1 week, Lamar actually threw over like 3 touchdown passes, which is very weird.
This stat blew my mind, Parker. Dobbins has 16 carries this season. 16 carries.
But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. They may be 16 carries, but when he carries the ball, he gets good yards off it.
Got 7.9 yards per carry.
That's what I mean. He has a high average because he's a tough running back. I absolutely can't stand Ohio State, and watch him play against Penn State was so hard because he was so hard to bring down.
Ingram, on the other hand, 45 carries, but again, only averaging 9 carries a game, and he's got 3 catches, so he's not even averaging 10 touches per game. There hasn't been 1 week that he's had more than 11 carries. That was last week with 11 for 57, and that's not a bad line, but if you're not catching anything out of the backfield, I mean, these were 2 people that were going really high in drafts. Again, I don't think they're usable. What about the Lions' backfield situation? Between Swift and Kerryon Johnson, of course, Peterson comes in just at the end of training camp. Gosh, are any of those even usable at this point?
I mean, maybe DeAndre Swift in like a flex situation or something, but not Kerryon Johnson. He has not put up any numbers this season.
I choose to just stay away from the Lions team in general. Matthew Stafford, you never know what he's going to do. Their tight end, who projected to get good points when I started him, he did absolutely nothing. So I choose to stay away from the Lions offense because they are literally like, okay, 1 week we do really good, and 3 weeks we'll show up again.
Even Adrian Peterson, who is getting some volume, 22 carries against Arizona, has had double-digit carries in some other games, only 1 touchdown, isn't too involved out of the backfield. I mean, that's just, let's stay away from those 2. And frankly, I think that, Tyler, you have a very interesting point here. Is Swift a trade target at this point? Because you can't imagine that the Lions are going, at some point they're going to have to get him more involved, wouldn't you think?
I mean, I would think so. But then again, the Lions offense always seems to struggle. I mean, Hawkinson, is, to Parker's point, should have been good. Kenny Galladay is their top receiver, and he seems to be up and down. So, I mean, I hope he can get it going. He's, the young rookie, but Detroit's always questionable.
I will say Swift is getting involved in the passing game. Does have 3 double-digit fantasy points. And in a PPR league, I guess you could do worse than that in the flex on a bye week. Their bye is week 5, was week 5, and so going forward, Swift will be available. I say there's no better time to buy on Swift. I wouldn't inject him right into your lineup, though. All right, we've got just a few minutes left, gentlemen. I want to get to our waiver wire pickups going into week number 6. I've got a few interesting ones, but we'll start off with Parker. Parker, who are we looking to pick up this week?
So if you are in desperate need of a quarterback, because if you had Dak Prescott like me, grab Kirk Cousins if you can. He's showing improvements from his couple performances where he was awful. He has 2 good wide receivers. take a roll of dice on him to try to help?
I'm shocked to see this because I didn't really think about it. He's got 7 interceptions in 5 games. Boy, in that game against Indianapolis week 2, I can't tell you the last time I've seen a negative score from a quarterback. Negative 1.48. He's got you about 15. A couple games with close to 20. I guess he looked okay against Seattle, but had the fumble, had the pick. It's for me, he's ranked number 24. What is it about it that you're seeing a bright future for Cousins?
Because I have Phillip Rivers, and Phillip Rivers ain't doing nothing. He literally scored me 3 points.
I think that is something that's surprising, even to me. I mean, I drafted him in a couple of leagues, and we traded. I'm shocked that Indy is not doing more. T.Y. Hilton's not doing anything. I had Mo Alley Cox in one of my DraftKings leagues. He had 0 this week. They're just not getting anything through the air, but yet they're still managing to pull out victories.
And then I got 2 other key ones. I will look for T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals because A.J. Green being out now, and they may double cover him this week, but eventually they're going to go back to Juju Smith-Schuster. I would look at Chase Claypool as a bench for now and see what happens.
I have a couple of questions about Claypool. Number one, obviously, I don't think it's fair to expect him to put up those numbers every week. But he has done very well. I think there's going to be a rush. I think we're a week late on Claypool, unless you're, down in your league and have waiver priority. I think we're a week late. Here's my question, Parker. I was so high on Deontay Johnson earlier this year. The last 3 weeks, he scored a grand total of like 2 points. Left with the concussion. Bye, and then this week had 1 for -2 and then went out with another injury. I guess here's my question. Johnson looks good going forward to play. It's not serious injuries. But has Claypool stepped up into that number 2 role in Pittsburgh?
I think so because I actually see Deontay Johnson more of a punt and kick returner. But the problem with Deontay Johnson is he likes to run backwards when he catches the ball. But
I'm assuming that their coaching staff doesn't think too highly of that.
But the thing with the Steelers wide receiver core noticing Claypool stepping up, we got James Washington, Juju, and then also Ray McCloud. And
Ebron.
And Ebron kind of made me mad, though. He fumbled twice. One got called back, but he did fumble that one. It almost cost us the game. And he was mad at himself for it. But I like Ebron, but he needs ball security. And in our backfield, I like our backfield. James Conner's looking really good. Anthony McFarland, the rookie from Maryland's looking pretty good. Benny Snell, he helps a little bit. So I'm happy with our offense right now.
What do we do with Deontay Johnson? Bench this week or roll the dice and think that he's going to get his roll back?
I would. That's a tough call because like you said, he got taken out for an injury. But I would hold on 1 week and see, but I don't see you holding him for more than 2 weeks. I don't think he's the best because I honestly think that because Ben, his target seems Claypool and James Washington when he's going wide receiver. Because Juju's obviously double covered.
So, and I don't think this would be the time to trade him. I guess you kind of have to hold on to him and see what happens, and then maybe if that's the case, because they have so many weapons there, if he has a decent week, maybe try to trade him. All right, Tyler, 2 waiver wire pickups for us.
Well, I had Teddy Bridgewater, but since we already talked about him, I just thought it was a little bit of a surprise that he was only in 42% of leagues. T. Higgins was another one, but Parker already talked about him, potentially being the top target there with A.J. Green being down.
Teddy Bridgewater, 42%. I'm shocked by that.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised. I thought, but I feel like we've talked about him enough, though. So another one I have is Laviska Shenault in Jacksonville. He has double-digit points, I think, in all of maybe 1 week. So I think he's easily a bench option.
And he's getting some solid targets. And is also, interestingly enough, has 9 carries on the season, which it certainly can get you a few extra points if you're getting those extra touches. Shark has not really panned out very well. No real indication. He's questionable going into this week, so no indication on when, if he's going to play. Jacksonville's kind of in the same situation. They have Cole, they have Eifert, they have all these receivers, and Minshew is putting up some decent numbers, but it's hard to rely on any of those players. But I do like Chenault, and I think moving forward, if he can stay healthy and maybe they have other injury problems, I think he could be definitely a decent flex play going forward. All right, I've got a couple. Alexander Madison, I think, is a really important add this week. First of all, if you had Dalvin Cook, you should have had him anyway, and so he is actually only owned in 41% of leagues, which I was very surprised by. But I'm going to throw this out, and we kind of talked about this earlier with Brian. Andy Dalton at 0.2% owned. Now, I'm not historically an Andy Dalton fan, and really it could have been insert quarterback name here, and I would give them some love simply because you know that the Cowboys are going to be playing from behind and are going to have to be putting up points. I also think with Elliott, Cooper, Gallup, Lamb, I really think he's got weapons. Am I going to start him over Teddy Bridgewater? Of course not. But I think that in this crazy season, I think Dalton's going to be a top 12-ish quarterback the rest of the way, simply if you just look at what Dak was doing from having to play from behind every single week. You could do worse than having him as your backup. Now, I wouldn't roll with just Andy Dalton for the rest of the season, but I think definitely worth a thought. And one more, we chatted about this person earlier, Cameron Brate, 1.8% owned. Now, again, he didn't light the world on fire last week, but again, to my earlier point about Rob Gronkowski, I would argue that he's got to be one of the biggest fantasy busts of the season, Rob Gronkowski. He's literally done nothing. Brate last week, 5 for 44 on 6 targets. I think Brate could be fantasy relevant, especially if people like Godwin, aren't playing. And I think that he's going to be a decent target around the red zone if you're struggling at tight end. I would also point out that I personally, I don't know about you, the both of you, but I personally am rostering a second tight end, whereas I would almost never roster 2 tight ends in the past. I'm definitely rostering 2 because of the COVID, the pandemic schedule.
Yeah, this season everything's on the table.
I have 2 tight ends in both my leagues, so.
All right, gentlemen, it brings us to our final segment where we select our Super Bowl champions. And yes, we can change our picks from previous in the season. It's, hey, things have changed an immense amount. How might this change moving forward? So, Parker, I'm going to start with you. Who do you have coming out of the NFC in the Super Bowl?
I like the Seahawks, Professor Miller. I really do. I think Russell Wilson might be your MVP this year.
Resilient. I mean, that game on Sunday Night Football, the way they battled back, they were basically trailing the entire time. The Vikings looked like they were about to blow them away in the first half. And then you give Russell the ball with 2 minutes left. It seems like he wins every single time. They are playing shootouts. It's almost like they're kind of like the Cowboys, except for, frequently the Cowboys are losing the games and the Seahawks are winning the games. But that being said, their defense is coming up just enough to hold off the other team to allow Russell Wilson
That's
to
one
get back
thing.
into it.
They talked about that on the Sunday night game, especially when Madison came in, is that their defense is struggling to stop the run. So I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on, because, of course, Russell Wilson and the offense can go up, put 30 points up a week, but if your defense is giving up 31, that's going to be something to watch out for.
So we got the Seahawks coming out of the NFC, the AFC, Victor, for you.
So the AFC has 3 top dogs, I think, that are good contenders you can consider going into next week is the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Steelers. For how much I want to say my team, I don't want to jinx them, even though Coach Cowher said on CBS that it's going to be them and the Seahawks. I still think it might be a dogfight repeat of the Ravens versus Chiefs, but I think the Ravens might get this time around because, in the end, defense win games. Ravens has the best defense out of the 3 because the secondary for the Steelers isn't the best. The Chiefs' defense...
Chiefs defense has been very good this season outside of what happened last Sunday.
Exactly.
But before that, the first 4 weeks, they didn't give up more than 20 points a game.
So I'm still going to go with my preseason pick with the Ravens and the Seahawks because I still think it's too early to change.
And I'm fine with that. Thoughts, Tyler, on the Super Bowl?
I agree with Parker. I think Seattle, I originally picked them, although I will say that Green Bay could give them a run. Aaron Rodgers is playing angry right now. So I would not be surprised if the NFC Championship game came down to them in Seattle. But as far as the AFC, I'm going to stick with the Chiefs. The Steelers have looked well, but to be honest, their tougher games are ahead of them yet. They have Baltimore twice. They play Buffalo.
Cleveland twice.
So they've looked good, but we'll see how they hold up. And Baltimore, look, I'm not on the Baltimore bandwagon. You know, they're a good team, but I have seen enough of Lamar Jackson to where I'm not impressed with him. He likes to say that, oh, I'm not a running quarterback. I have, especially when they played the Chiefs, the dude puts his head down right away and looks to run. He can't throw down the field. He overthrows a lot of guys. And I'm not saying he's not good, but I don't even want to hear the fact that he's in the same conversation as Patrick Mahomes anymore. I just don't.
Oh, that's a given. Patrick Mahomes is on a different level. Patrick Mahomes is the greatest player in the NFL right now.
The Ravens are good. I don't think they're better than the Chiefs, and they might not even be better than the Steelers.
But the Ravens are always a defensive team. That's why I still have them picked.
I think one thing that does detract from the Steelers is that they did have that bye week early. They didn't have a true bye week. And again, this could happen to other teams moving forward, so we just don't know at this point. But I wonder if that hurts the Steelers in the long term. And again, to your point, Parker, I'm interested to see in the two Ravens contests, see what happens there. But Brian, it's your turn to take a look at your Super Bowl picks. Who's going to the Super Bowl?
I had the Saints, if I'm correct. Didn't I say Saints and Chiefs?
I believe so.
Yeah, and I had the Saints winning because I'm still behind that conspiracy theory that this is like Peyton Manning's last year.
You can change your picks.
I mean, I think the Kansas City thing is pretty much a guarantee. The Saints, we'll see. I mean, not the best team in the world right now.
They're also missing their best player.
Alvin Kamara's playing. Nah, I'm only kidding. I feel you, but I like Green Bay. I like Green Bay as well. I mean, that could be a team that represents the NFC. Seattle's not a bad team to represent. I think the NFC's going to be one of those three teams. I could have said if Dak was actually back, we might be able to pull something off. But now,
no belief in Andy Dalton.
Nope, no belief in Andy Dalton. The line, again, is not there. Gerald McCoy's injury actually really, really hurt. And Van Der Esch is not... he's supposed to come back this week. He's not healthy. We know it. They rushed him back. And so we'll see. But out of those three teams, I like what Green Bay's doing right now. I do. That with Lazard is out, but he filled in that 1 week and just went off.
Aaron Jones has been good as well.
Aaron Jones, he's definitely in the MVP conversation this season.
Rodgers is looking pretty good too.
And I liked what Aaron Rodgers said. I don't know if you heard, where he said people like judging down years and everything. His down years are better than people's like career years. So I thought that was pretty cool when he said that.
Okay. In the NFC, I'm going to say that the two teams would be the Seahawks and the Bucks. I'm still a believer in Tom Terrific down in the Bucks, but I do think it's the Seahawks going to the NFC Championship game and being victors there. AFC looks pretty clear to me. Ravens, Chiefs. I'm going to take the Seahawks and the Chiefs, and I'm going to take the Seahawks. I'm going away from the Saints. I'm really, really, really surprised how the Saints have played. Breeze looks done. I would say I'm interested to see what Michael Thomas looks like when he gets back. But I'm going to go with the Seahawks.
Saints defense has looked a little rough too. So
yeah.
Well, gentlemen, it's always a pleasure each month to meet here on the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide. Of course, we'll be back with you in November and December, and hopefully we'll have to see how things go. But I'd like to wrap it up with a postseason in January as well. But we'll be back here with you in middle of November. So until then, I'd like to thank Tyler Coleman. Tyler, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I enjoy coming and talking football with you guys.
And going to Vegas, and you've got plenty of opportunity not only to bet on the Braves to win it all.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'll be honest. I'm very surprised that the Braves are where they're at right now. I did not see them winning Game 1 last night, but I was talking to my brother. I said, could you imagine if the Chiefs and the Braves both won championships in the same year? I don't even know if I would have.
And they announced earlier today, Kershaw's out for Game 2.
Yep.
And Parker, thank you so much for being here. Always a pleasure.
I like being here. It's great. I think this was a great month to talk and a lot of things to talk about. It's always good to talk.
Well, I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about by next time. Brian, Christiana, thank you for being here. And I'm Professor Paul Miller. So we will be back here with you next month on the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide. For Brian, Christiana, Tyler Coleman, Parker Rose, this is Professor Miller, and we'll see you again next month with the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide.
You can't forget